What's up, everybody? Another edition here of Homestead from Scratch with John and Logan here. And we are going to talk a little bit about perfect being the enemy of the good and get into that topic a little bit tonight. So I guess we'll kind of go around and see how you guys have been doing this past week. I know, Logan, we missed you last week, so maybe you can start off by giving us a little update on how things are going on your end.
Yeah, things are spring is springing, as I've been saying for a little while now, and it is super busy. Yeah, last week I had just a horrible. It was one of those headaches that I could stand to exist. You get some of those where you want to just cut off the lights and cover your eyes and everything, but it was very hard to just think and focus on something and talk, and I was just out of it. I listened a little bit to y'all, and then I listened some after the live stream put it on. And but yeah, had been missing with that. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. Our little lamb, Jesus, is growing like crazy. And let's see here, the pigs, been moving them around, cleaning up areas. Ducks are sitting on nests. I mean, things are. And I was just recently, before we started the stream, cleaning out some more aquatic plants and getting ready to move out a lot of the mosquito fish into little water gardens and rain catchment stuff to, keep mosquitoes down and have something else to feed the ducks and fish and everything else. So yeah, things have been going. Work's been going, and it's been raining. Rain has been killing me on everything I've been doing.
Yeah, it's been raining a lot. Yeah, there's flooding. Well, that's great, man. Yeah, I know you had a little bit of a pig emergency while we were doing our little thing at the property.
I did, yeah. The dog kennel that I had give to me turns out did not have the proper reinforcement on one of the panels at the bottom, and the pigs got out. But they're really easy to get back up, and they have got out again. And it's because they figured out how to lift the whole door and get it off the hinges. And so I'm scratching the dog kennel for now, because the way I had it reinforced, they were doing great. They couldn't get out, but they figured out how to get the door off the hinges. So it's not going to work for now. So I got to figure out how to keep the door on the hinges. But it is absolutely amazing. I can put them in an area for a day. They're not real deep rooters like a lot of your feeder pigs. I've got the coonies, so they are excellent. If you've got the soil conditions just right, you can set them up in an area and they can till you a garden in a day, and you don't have to do anything. It's a tractor that appreciates rather than depreciates.
You know what, Logan? You know what you call a pig that figures out how to open the door?
A regular pig? I don't know.
That's a free range pig.
That's a free range. It's a free thinking pig.
He just goes wherever he wants to,
Yeah.
That's all good. That's all good. That's all good. And just I don't want to cut you off there, Logan, but if I'd like to move over to what I'm doing over here with my cows, I'll tell you what is my favorite time of year, at least when it comes to being on the farm. I get to see all of the different grasses and forages that are springing up in the springtime, and because I can't explain it to you, but being a rancher or somebody who raises grass and cows, however you want to make that, is like in the winter, it's like everything's dead. It doesn't look like it's ever going to come back. You're being very careful about how you graze your animals. You're feeding them hay. And then the spring comes along and like it explodes. I mean, I've got everything I ever wanted on this farm. I mean, there's, I talked to you about this, Logan, the hairy veg. It's like everywhere. Crimson clover is everywhere. Red clover is everywhere. It's like, it's such an amazing thing to see. And especially when you're rotationally grazing, it's getting better every year. You see improvements and you're going, wow, my work of moving these cows every day or every other day is really paying off. I'm seeing orchard grass, and I'm seeing, the fescue is always going to be there, but it's like, I just see this explosion of life in the springtime, and there's the phrase, hope springs eternal, and that has a lot to do with spring other than spring, because in spring, all of your hopes for the rest of the year are expressed in what you're seeing. Now, is it going to turn out? That's up to you and how you manage your land. But nature has given you everything you need to be successful at this time of year. What you do with it is up to you. And so it's just like this really good reinforcing thing of like, I'm working hard, it's paying off, I'm seeing the fruits of my labor, but being a farmer, being a rancher, you get into other parts of the year when you go into a drought and everything's dying, and I don't think it's ever going to make it. And this is a horrible situation. But that is part of being combined with nature. And when you're a homesteader, you're combining your future with the future of your land. And you have so much impact on it, but the rest nature is going to take care of. So you have to be hopeful for the future, and that's all. That's really all I'm saying. Is like, this is the time of hope and looking into like, wow, things are really great. They can turn on you, but this is a really great time of year. I mean, because if you're gardening, you're really not harvesting anything at this point, but you're just seeing things grow, and they're just growing at this point almost exponentially. Not so much your garden crops, because it's still a little cool, but I mean, grass is just like exploding, and it's just a great thing to see. And for our audience, if you live on property where you have a little bit of pasture, you probably know what I'm talking about. But it's a good thing, that you get to see that this time of year. It's my favorite time of year.
Well, talking about this, both I'd say all of us, we probably had a dream about doing this kind of a lifestyle, right? And doing some kind of raising of our own food. And I guess now it'd be maybe considered a little bit against the grain of kind of what everybody else is kind of, buying the majority of their own food, and kind of plugged into that. But I don't know. We talked about the topic for tonight's show is letting perfect being the enemy of the good. So, was there something with both of you guys like that got you to just get started, no matter, even though John, I'm sure you didn't know the whole ins and outs of regenerative beef farming when you got started. Like,
no, I didn't. And if you listen to Greg Judy, and I mean, I'm fortunate that I started out as a novice cattle person, having never raised cattle in my entire life. So I didn't know how to do it, which knowing how to do it is the conventional way, right? That's what all my neighbors do, So I didn't have any bad habits to break. I just go, oh shit, let's try it this way. But when you're talking about don't let perfect be the enemy of good, and I think I've made this reference, I make it in the kind of Pareto chart 80-20 thing. It's like, get the 80% and do that. Worry about the 20% later. That's the perfect part, right? It's like get the crops in the ground. Fail before you succeed. Don't sit there and go, oh well, I had this perfect garden and there's no weeds in it and it's perfect and it's everything. You know what? That's a fantasy and a dream in most contexts. I mean, I live on, a place that has a lot of rocks and a lot of, there's a lot of Bermuda grass, which is like it will invade every garden you ever plant and it'll make a disaster out of it if you want to have this perfectly pristine garden where there's nothing green in it except your plants, and you have to, so perfection is really what social media and modern social media, I guess I would say, tries to push on you. And it doesn't have to be gardening. It doesn't have to be homesteading. It can be health. It can be exercise. It can be almost anything. It's like you have to do X, Y, and Z to be perfect. And it's like you're overloaded by all of this information. And guess what happens? You never do a fucking thing. You just sit there and go, oh shit, this is too complicated. I can't do it, and that is the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. Fail before you succeed. Don't try to be a success the first time out. I mean, certainly if it happens, great for you. But man, failure is like the greatest teaching tool ever. Because if you make a mistake and you fail, you have a reason to change and make it better. If you never fail, then you really don't know how good you can be, right? So there's a lot of things wrapped up in this whole old idea of don't let perfect be the enemy of good, and I mean, even on a spiritual level, at one time a priest told me that. He said, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Be a good person. And it's great to try to be a perfect person, but be a good person first, do good things and good things for other people. You may screw up, you may not be completely successful, but your intentions and what you do is going to move you forward, because the alternative is to do nothing, and nobody benefits from that.
That's key. I think that's key. What you said is accepting that you're going to fail and to embrace the failure and to keep moving forward through those failures and keep learning. Logan, right. What are your thoughts on perfect is the enemy of the good?
Well, someone can go and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure John brought up a spiritual aspect of it. If you look at the New Testament, which was written in Greek, I want to say that the original translation for the word perfect, as in, the scripture, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect, actually meant complete and not without flaw. And so a lot of times I think when we think about, having something that's perfect, think of it not having flaws, but rather than just say, like, oh, well, it's complete. So I would say set goals to have your perfect homestead, because we do. For example, like with my chickens, eventually the goal with the chickens, ducks, and everything else is to have enough feed during the summer being produced, and then to cut back on our breeding stock during the winter. And if we have to buy feed, we have to, but hopefully we can store up enough to be almost 100%, self-sufficient. Of course, we're going to have inputs of waste streams and stuff like that, but, let that be the perfect or the completed project, but, just do good things until you get to the perfect. Because it's far better to go ahead and to have some laying hens and to be feeding them, even if you're not feeding non-GMO or any of that. You're just buying the regular old bags of feed, the cheapest you can get, and you've got your birds out on a little tractor that you can move them around on pasture. That is far better than waiting around until you have all the systems in place to, grow all your own feed, or to, feed them all summer long, or all spring, summer, and fall long on black soldier fly larvae like I do. And it's better to just go ahead and get started, because I always think about how, on a real intense level, we haven't been trying to grow our own food for very long. It's only been, say, 4 or 5 years, and it's like I think about, the time that I grew up helping in the garden. I planted some garden plants. I kept chickens for a long time as a teenager. And if I had not have done those things, I wouldn't have the ease that I do now when it comes to a lot of animal husbandry things. Because there's a lot of stuff like, I picked up the sheep, didn't know anything about sheep at all. Started just researching it some. And a lot of the stuff I figured out as I go because a lot of stuff translates. Of course, there's some stuff that's different, but, getting started and doing something, just like Joel Salatin says, he says, people ask him, how do they get started? And he says, well, what are you doing now? And that's the big question. What are you doing now? Get on something. If you grow nothing but, a pot of basil, just do something.
Right.
Yeah. I think that is a big key. It's like, and maybe a lot of times that we're a little bit have in our heads that the fear of judgment of others, and maybe that can be another holdup for a lot of people.
Screw them.
Is that,
Sorry to be frank, but screw them. Let people judge.
Yeah, you gotta get that out of your head if you're gonna do anything. That's gonna be some kind of pursuit that you're interested in. There's always going to be people that are going to get on your case. Like, why are you doing that? It's like, we can go buy that from the grocery store. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Well, and one of the, when you're talking about the perfect, and we get those ideas in our head from a number of different areas, but, and this is one thing. We have a podcast that's on the internet. It's on YouTube. Both Greg and Logan have their own separate channels. The perfect, a lot of times, is what people see on social media. But you know what? And this may be obvious. It may not be obvious, but those channels and those videos are created to create the perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They're one thing that bothers me is they rarely tell you the mistakes they made when they're trying to get to the perfect.
Yep.
They only want to show the sunny side of the farm,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, that's not reality. Nobody's learning from following somebody else on YouTube and doing it exactly the way they did it, because context matters, right? And it's like, and they won't tell you the mistakes they made, which is like, it hurts me when I see that, because it's like, man, I've made mistakes but I've learned from them, man. But if you never make a mistake, then you don't really, from my perspective, if you don't make mistakes, you're never really learning anything. You're just kind of going on a prescriptive way of raising food and animals. And it's like, I can tell you almost 100% that just doesn't work, because your individual situation is going to be unique amongst everybody else. And the things and the challenges you have are not going to be like Joel Salatin or Greg Judy or Doug and Stacy or all these other people that you see on the internet. Nothing wrong with those people, but you're going to have your own individual challenges that those people never even talk about. And you're going to have to figure it out yourself, or hopefully have some friends to help you figure that out. And when you do, you're 10 times better. You're that much closer to perfect, but I hope you never get there, because you're only learning on your path to perfection. Once you get there, then, well, you're in heaven, and we don't need to learn anymore. So that the perfection is the enemy of good, in the fact that you can't, when you see somebody doing it perfectly and they're not giving you enough information, for you to succeed, because that kind of holds out that siren sound, that Scylla and Charybdis, that magical sound that drives the sailors into the rocks. It's like
kind of like the comparison is the thief of joy kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm not at that point, so I'm not successful. So
right. And it's like,
what's the point of doing it now?
Don't let that happen. Measure yourself. I mean, it's the same thing with working out. It's like I start out and I can't lift 40 pounds over my head, but 6 months later I can lift 100 pounds over my head. But just because Arnold Schwarzenegger can do 250 pounds over his head doesn't mean you're not doing good things and you're not making progress and you're not maximizing your abilities. So just try not to use other people going, I want to be exactly like that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but know that along the way, it's not going to be that easy. And there's a lot of hard lessons to be learned along the way. And that's not bad. That's actually good, because you're learning and you're being a better steward of your land and your resources. And that's all isn't that really what we're all about? It's like being good stewards of what God has given us in this world and making it as productive and as functioning as we can. I mean, I think in a very basic manner, that's what it's all about.
I agree with that statement.
Yep.
This kind of relates, I can kind of segue into this a little bit, but there was a really good interview with Robert Rodriguez. He's a independent filmmaker. He was on Joe Rogan recently. He talked a lot about this and how he started. He made a $7,000 budget movie called Mariachi that he took and won like Sundance with that independent movie that he shot pretty much by himself, doing like all the editing and all the shooting of the film and everything like that. And, one of the big takeaways that I took from this interview was he talked about what we're talking about, where, you might, whatever thing that you're interested in doing, if you are just learning about it, but never taking any action, you're not building those, learning through failures. So really he expressed it's more about creating a body of work, whatever that type of work you're going to do is. And so that's going to come with you just taking some action. You have to move forward in some way instead of wanting to do everything, make the perfect film per se. Like if he waited to have all the nice gear and all the stuff to do all of it, his, masterpiece film and put out this masterpiece, he would have never made the first film because he just had all these barriers stopping him. So I think this is a really good interview for people that are looking to do some kind of pursuit in their life that, a lot of the times it's about taking those first steps towards something. And if you don't have it all figured out right away, good. You'll figure it out as you go. Which I think is a lot of what we've been talking about here is like, maybe sometimes that's the biggest impediment is just to, getting the ball rolling, like starting with something like Logan was saying, start with a little plant. If you have no green thumb and you don't want to plant a big garden or anything like that, and you don't necessarily have the room for livestock, but maybe you can grow a windowsill plant to grow some herbs that you can use in your dishes or something, cooking. So
if there's anybody that's really wanting to just start out with homesteading, even if you've got property and you want to grow some of your own food, but say you've got zero animal husbandry skills, you've never really grown a garden, whatever it is, somebody starting basically from zero, I think one of the most fun things is like hydroponics and aquariums. I'm leaving aquaponics out of that because aquaponics requires a lot more finesse than, hydroponics and just keeping, aquariums or something like that. But there's a lot that you can do with that.
Finesse.
And I mean, the hydroponic, you can grow.
Just messing with you.
What's that?
Finesse.
Finesse.
What you talking about, man? What'd you call me?
Reminds me. Oh God, no! I'm not going to get off on a comedy. Nope. Stop that. But yeah, aquaponics does require a lot of finesse, a lot of skill. It's something that's I think a higher skill level. But from everything, I've never done hydroponics. I kept a lot of aquariums before, but hydroponics seems fairly simple. It's growing plants in trays in water, and you use a solution of nutrient to feed those plants, and you can grow a lot of stuff. You can do stuff like microgreens. So being able to start inside and get some easy successes, because guess what? The pests don't come inside that eat your plants. So you get to basically, you get to cry when you start a garden, and then you've got, all the beetles and bugs and larvae eating the inside of your, the vines of your plants and everything. But starting with something like that inside is way better than doing nothing. And I mean, there's, all these little benefits to these things that you can do. And I think that a lot of people that get kind of woke to the things that are going on, all the food's poison, whatever it may be, their thing that they discover, then they're kind of just like, they go kind of one of two ways. Either they start doing something about it, or they, try to just forget about it and kind of go back to sleep, kind of like in the Matrix, and just go back into the little battery cell and never wake up. And it's really sad, because it's like, look, I mean, you've got to stick with what you're in control of, because the only way that you are going to absolutely just be able to go back to 100% being a natural human, in a couple of days, is just, you better have enough survival skills and just run out into the woods. And even then, it's debatable whether or not you're still getting some kind of strange chemical, whether it be from water or the air, whether they're, trying to do some kind of climate control. I mean, you don't know what they're spraying and stuff, insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, everything that's sprayed on everything. It's just, it's extremely overwhelming. And that's why I like a lot of people like Billy Bond, for example. I don't watch his channel a whole lot, but everything that I've seen that he does, just like with, taking food waste and doing compost and growing pigs and chickens and everything. It's like, man, let's at least, knock down your poison level by a couple of percent every year, like you don't have to either just get rid of all of it or, quit. And I think that's where a lot of people stand, because it's like, it's nice to think about, having a farm like Joel Salatin's, but are you going to be there in just a week or two? No, it's going to take years, because it took him years. It took them generations.
I do want to kind of dive into that aspect, because you guys have somewhat of a process on developing your goals. On where are you setting goals for, like, okay, I want to get to this point this next year with my food production, or John, I want to see this restoration of the soil levels and all this for the next season of cattle. Or,
well, yeah.
Are you setting goals like that, or are you kind of like, how do you process with that?
They're not real strict goals. It's not like I'm in a corporation and say you have to generate this much profit next year or whatever like that. It's more longer. I mean, there are some long-term goals, right? There should be long-term goals for anybody that is attempting to do this, but it should definitely not impact your day-to-day, what you're doing. Like my long-term goal is to have the most the highest producing, best quality grass-fed beef in Giles County, Tennessee. That's my goal. Now, I'm not close to being there. It may be 10 years down the road. But what I do every day is pointing towards that goal. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean I'm doing the wrong thing. You know, but on a short-term basis, it's like I want to slowly every year increase the carrying capacity of my land, which means I've taken good care of it. I'm not forcing that capacity. I'm allowing that capacity to happen by good management. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, if I don't have 12 cows on my property next year, I failed. No, I need to take a step to get it there. And then a couple of years later, 14, maybe 16, maybe 20. I don't know the end point of that, of what it's going to possibly hold efficiently and productively. But yeah, those are all things that you're working towards. And if you're not working towards something, then you know, I mean, it's okay. I mean, but you've got to know what you want to be. Now, if everybody starts the day off and is like, I want to be like Joel Salatin, well, again, you might want to scale that back a little bit, you know, but do the best that whatever you have can produce. I guess that's a real smushy goal, but it's like, if you're on 20 acres or 10 acres or 5 acres, you want to make that 5 acres as productive as possible with the least amount of inputs possible, you know, right? And hopefully without massive amounts of physical labor, you know, and I don't know. I mean, everybody has to set their goals, but that goal is when you get up in the morning and what you do every day, and this is no different than this is kind of really a corporate mentality is like, you know, I've worked for a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and it's like, the goal of this company is to do X, Y, and Z. And if every day you go into your inbox on your email and you got emails that don't apply to that goal, move on to the next email that does and work on that first. Then come back to the BS and the, you know, oh yeah, I got to go to a meeting and I go to do that. But your job is to every day get up and make your farm, your homestead better, so that in the future it is what you want it to be. And if it's a bunch of bullshit that is like not really aimed toward that goal, and maybe you got off track and you're thinking about something else, you know, hey, we all reevaluate every now and then, but really, you know, that's what goal setting is about, right? It's like, it's my daily activities relating to my long-term goals in some way. You know, it might be convoluted, but if it's not, you know, you're doing a lot of work that maybe is, you know, not necessary. I don't know. You have to figure it out yourself, and depending on what your goals are, because it's really important that you, as a human being, you feel productive and you feel like you're progressing in a direction that you want to go, because motivation dies really quickly when you don't feel like you're making progress, and you don't want to be in that situation. Don't want to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to this in a lot of ways. It's like seeing in my own life, like feeling like not making a whole lot of progress. But you know, if I can kind of look at where I was a few years ago and compare it to where I am now, like, I know at least health wise, I'm in a way better position with my health than where I was a few years ago. And then also moving closer to some goals I've had by partnering up with Logan on the property to start working on making that a reality. Because, you know, that was in my head for a long time, but I kind of let it just lay dormant there for a while. And, you know, being able to team up with Logan with all his skills and abilities and getting to work with him out there has helped that move forward and start becoming something where it was just kind of sitting there. So, yeah, I mean, you just got like, you gotta you got to kind of look at the body of the things that you've been doing and like seeing like, okay, I am further along than where I was. And this is something I struggle with pretty bad. Like, I'm not an organized person. I got to get better at that. Like, I've heard, listen to people, they say like, and even this thing with Robert Rodriguez, he talked about how he kind of does his creative process and kind of maps out his art and his project and how he's going to do it is by taking a stack of index cards and kind of putting it down into like achievable things, at least as far as the story goes and how he's creating a story. But he says you can apply, the index card method to any creative endeavor, any kind of goal, any kind of thing that you're working on. And, if you don't know where to start and you kind of, unsure about where to begin, he was talking about kind of becoming a conduit for creativity and just sitting there and kind of, just start writing, and things will just start coming through during that writing process, and whatever kind of problem, whatever thing you're kind of working on to achieve, that those things can kind of come out through that process. I don't know, Logan, do you have like any kind of specific thing like where you're like, I need to focus on these few things first, achieve those things, then move on to the next thing? Do you kind of write those down? Do you keep some kind of note system for that? How do you stay focused on those things that you need to get done and getting to your larger goals?
Well, my boss is a complete ass and requires a lot of me. And if you don't know who my boss is, his name is Logan Hyde, and he requires me to do a lot of stuff. And if I were to like put everything that I do under one corporation, I would have to call it something like too many irons in the fire. So I'm guilty of doing too much, and you can really, if not like what John was talking about, kill your motivation. Because I do a lot of the stuff that I love, and so most of the time I'm pretty motivated, like almost about 24/7. But it can make your life a lot more stressful than it needs to be, on doing that. But as far as goals, though, I do try to put like some actual physical, or set goals and say like, hey, this is where we're going to get to. Like this year, for example, just to give one of them, is to raise 100 ducks for the freezer. And so I wanted to do 200, but I had to have a talk with my boss and say like, hey boss, let's be a little more realistic. So I've got 15 hens, Muscovy hens, cooped up. They're all starting to sit on nest, and so that's kind of like one of my goals is just to the production, because I think if you start it like, hey, what do I need to produce for my family and what do I want, and then try to base everything that you do around that, because I could set the goal of like, well, I want to grow all the feed for my chickens, or I want to grow a half-acre garden, or I want to do this. But like without the actual end goal of, well, this is why I'm doing it, you're not going to really have a direction. So with the 100, ducks I'm wanting to raise for the freezer, that's very specific. I want to be able to eat 100 ducks. And so I've got to do everything, and I've got to set up my daily task with the ducks and things that I'm going to do throughout the season to fit that goal. And I want to do it as cheaply as I possibly can. And when I say cheaply, just as far as inputs goes, I'm still going to have labor and everything, but try to make my labor efficient on that too. And that's the thing. I think it's you want to start at the end goal, and people have a really hard time with this because it's like, oh, I want chickens so I can have farm fresh eggs, and nobody sits down and says, how many eggs do I need? A week or a month. If you're like me, we've got, I think, 11 hens right now. It's nowhere near enough. I rarely eat an egg now, but my wife will put eggs into everything she cooks. She eats a ton of them. My girls, no, seriously, like we can easily go through a dozen eggs a day. It's absolutely insane. So had we have, in that specific aspect, put the goal of like, hey, we need to have a dozen eggs a day, then our setup would look slightly different, you know. It's maybe not a dozen, but it is very close. I mean, it is very.
Well,
that is not an exaggeration.
When you're trying to eat a lot of your own food and you're cooking that food yourself, right? You start to try to be creative with the food that you have on hand.
Well, I think Logan, you're in a fairly unique position the way your homestead is set up, and I think a lot of people can learn from that because you have a choice. You can spend your extra, I call extra time. You can, but there's no such thing as extra time for you. You only have 24 hours a day.
Right.
You don't have any extra time. So you either spend your time going outside the family, going outside where you live and going and earning money, or to feed your family, or you can spend some of that time on your own property feeding your family. And that's a unique position. Not a lot of people are in that position. And you're a great example of how this works. It's like you can either work outside the farm or you can work on the farm to provide for your family. It's up to you, you know, and what do you feel most comfortable for? I know what most people would say. I don't want to go and work for somebody else to earn money to feed my family. I would rather work on my own property and feed my family and not depend on Joe Blow to pay me for yard work or landscaping or framing or whatever it is, you know, you might do that week. And so I think that you're a really good example of how this can work out and those decisions you need to make, right? It's like, okay, you know what? I got a project that's going to require some money. I'm going to have to work more outside the family for a little while until I earn that money, but I'm going to bring it back here to the family, and it's going to make everything here work better, right? You know, this is kind of your situation is very much harkens back to probably what my grandparents and great grandparents did, right? You know, that own property. It's like very few people 100 years ago just worked on their farm. They always had side businesses. They always had things that they did on the side to earn extra, because farming is not, although you don't think of it this way, it's not necessarily a cash business. You just don't have cash coming in every week like a paycheck. You get paid once a year as a farmer, you know, or maybe twice a year, depending on the crops. So you have to have other side businesses to kind of supplement the cash needs of the family. And I know this is getting a little far afield for homesteaders, but if you're looking into the future and you're looking at setting goals, these are going to be some decisions you're going to have to make of where my source of income's from. And you as the main laborer in the whole, you know, equation is, where do I apply my labor, outside or inside the farm? And I mean, my hat's off to you, Logan. You do a great job at that. And I'm sure your family appreciates that, but I know it's not easy.
Yeah. Thanks for the praise, but I do put a lot of good stuff on YouTube. I'm pretty good at putting a lot of my failures too, but we're nowhere near where we want to be. Sure. I know last year we had, I think it was a whole pig in the freezer, which it was a smaller pig. We had a couple of lambs. I want to say they were probably like 8-month-old ram lambs, and we had a bunch of duck, a bunch of rabbit. I mean, we had last year just a freezer full, but like you said, it's that kind of yearly payment. And now we're like, the freezer's empty and we're trying our best to get animals so we can have, you know, that good homegrown meat. And it is. It's extremely important to have other sources of income. But, you know, something I did a video, and I think I've mentioned it in one of our live streams before, but I did the math on which is cheaper, store-bought eggs or, raising them yourself. And raising them yourself came out cheaper. Now, mind you, eggs are really expensive right now, but so is everything else. So feed, everything is factored in. And what people don't realize is, okay, not only are you saving the money on the food, because somebody would say, oh, well, eggs are only $4 a dozen. I'm better off earning that money and then just going and buying it from the store. But here's something that you have to remember. One, it's taking you away from your homestead or your house or your yard or whatever, the place that you want to be with your family. It's taking you away from that.
Hopefully that's where you want to be.
Hopefully. For some people, it's probably not, but you want to be there. And if you go earn money, guess what? Here comes Big Daddy government. Pay up, buddy. So you've got to earn the money, pay taxes on it, so you can go to the store so you can pay taxes to buy it, depending on which state you live in, of course. If you're in Alabama, it's about 10%, tax on groceries. So you've got to pay that, and you got to go drive, and you got to go get it. It's just, and you got to go into Walmart, and hopefully you don't see anybody that that wants to talk to you for 30 minutes in Walmart. And so, you go through all that and you think about, or you can have chickens that just make your life better. You put in a little bit of effort and you can have an egg that is 10 times better, dare I say, probably 100 times better than what you're going to get at the grocery store. And it's like people don't factor in all of those things. And a lot of people would say, it's like, hey, now, if someone were to buy from me the stuff that I raise, it's not going to be cheap at all. But it's the value of it is a lot higher than the stuff you're going to buy at the store. And that's why I think people should just try to do some of it yourself. My goodness, there should not be an egg industry in the United States. It shouldn't exist. Eggs should be something that's like people buying dirt, which I know people buy dirt for fill and stuff like that, or for raised beds, whatever it may be. But like it's like people should just be like, that's retarded. Why are you going to go buy eggs? Don't you just get them out of your backyard? Like, do you not have enough kitchen scraps? Do you need me to give you some kitchen scraps, bro, to help you out?
Well, you know what, Logan, you make a really good point there about, well, if you're going to buy it from me, it's going to be expensive. You want to know why? Because your time and your effort has to be paid for. I'm not doing this for charity. I'm not doing this for any other reason than, I'm providing it to you, but there's some cost in there above the actual material cost. It's called my time. It's called my effort. It's called my property. It's my electricity, it's my water, it's my everything. So that's what people don't understand when they buy from a farmer or even in a farmer's market. Is like, why is this so expensive? Is because you're paying for not just that product, but everything that makes it possible. And a lot of that is just labor, just sweat equity that you put into your business. And if people aren't willing to pay you for that, then move on to somebody who will, because that's I don't have any problem. If somebody's like, well, that's expensive, fine. I set my prices so I can be profitable and I get paid for my work. And if that's too much for you, then we can move on. There are other places to buy it from. Although I will say, with the price of beef, I'm still fairly cheap when it comes to buying.
Absolutely.
Comes to buying cheap. So it's like, it's really, when people, oh, well, that's expensive. It's like, well, but you're paying somebody to do that work that you could do yourself. So do it yourself. Raise some chickens. Raise some eggs. And then after a year or two of that, and go, well, you know what? Logan had a point there. His $6 for a dozen of farm fresh eggs was, actually, that's a pretty good deal. after I went and bought a coop and paid for feed and paid for my breeding stock and paid for this and paid for the taxes on my income that I generated and paid for the
Yep.
sales tax when I bought it at Walmart, you know. But most people, that's too much math for most people. And
But
I understand because I'm not really good at it myself. But you know, you got to think about it twice when you start complaining about prices.
it always kills me when I have somebody that want a job done. I do handyman stuff, so I do a little bit of everything, a lot of carpentry and stuff. But it'll be funny to me. Somebody will be asking about a job. They'll say, "Well, how much would it cost to do this, that, or the other?" And I go through and say, "Well, let's see if you got this." And I go, "Well, all you got to do is this right here." They keep downplaying the labor that's in the job, and I'm just always like, "Well, it sounds like you could just do it." I don't say that to them, but I definitely think it. I definitely think it.
That's pretty easy. Why don't you just do it yourself?
Well, it sounds like you got this taken care of.
Well, talking a lot about this, and I've been hearing this from friends of mine that have children, and they are, in jobs where now that they're asking them to come back into the office, they're all mad and, talking about how their family was doing a lot better with everybody in the home, and the family is thriving a lot more by them getting to work from home and things like that. And I've been reading this book recently. I mean, it kind of relates to that, and it's about the history of compulsory schooling on by John Taylor Gatto. So it's a really cool book, and it kind of goes into how the school system is set up to kind of you have the ringing of the bell where you were spending time getting into some form of the information, but now the bell rings and now you have to go off and do something else, so you can't really focus your attention on one thing. So it kind of is training people to kind of not be able to focus on actually getting into a problem and solving it. But goes into the history a little bit of compulsive education, and talked about here on page 21 of the book. It talks about our form of schooling is an invention of the state of Massachusetts around 1850. It was resisted sometimes with guns by an estimated 80% of Massachusetts population. The last outpost was in Barnstable on Cape Cod, not surrendering its children until the 1880s, when the area was seized by militia and children marched to school under guard. So, that's kind of the history of where the whole schooling thing comes from. But then he goes on to say the homeschooling movement has quietly grown to a size where 1.5 million young people are being educated entirely by their own parents. And they did some studies on that. Last month, the Education Press reported the amazing news that in their ability to think, children schooled at home seem to be 5 or even 10 years ahead of their formally trained peers. So, when parents are involved in the children's learning, and you don't have this by force compulsory schooling, where it really is kind of putting you into a learned helplessness situation, because you can't. It's not really allowing you to figure out and do the problem solving. On the other hand, it suggests that the way that the elites teach their children is to kind of put them off on and kind of isolate them, but then present them with a problem that they have to solve. And sometimes this involves physical harm to the person. And it gives one example of getting a horse to gallop. So there's no instruction. It's here's your horse, get the horse to gallop, and maybe jump over some objects or something like that, and then kind of leave them off to figure it out on their own, basically. And they have to kind of creatively figure out how to figure out their way through that problem on their own. And it just kind of talks a little bit about maybe why we're in the position that we're in, and how our societies kind of maybe can't figure out their way through some of the problems, and kind of figure out new solutions because of the way that we've all been kind of put into this system. So anyway, I don't know. We did this last time. I'm reading some books, so I'm just gonna throw out some books that may relate to the topics we're talking about. But this is a good, one.
But Greg, that's a really good point, because when you're talking about, especially when the advent of, I like the way they put it, compulsory education, because you didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
it's compelled upon you and your children, especially back then. There wasn't any homeschool, except for the elites. But the thing is that is all a not a symptom, but it's all based on the mindset of the time period, right? What was going on? That was the dawning of the Industrial Revolution,
right.
Where you have a single input, you put it through a process, and you spit out a product at the other end. And that's all they were trying to do with education. We're going to normalize, standardize, and push everything through the same system. And hopefully when it comes out the other end, we have cars or, refrigerators or whatever. But, with education, they basically did the same thing. It's like, push everything through the same filter, the same system, and then we all come out the same at the end, because in the end, that's what an industrialized society needs. They need robots, but we didn't call them robots back then. They were human beings, but they were all trained the very same way, plugged into the very same system, and produced the very same products for probably almost 100 years. Unfortunately, the world has changed drastically since 1850, but our system is still the same. We're not producing free thinkers. We're not producing people who can solve problems. We're only producing people that can do one thing that we teach them, and that's all we want them to know. And that's the harm right there.
In the first part of this book, it talks about 7 things basically that the public education system is instilling in the kids that go through it. He's got 1 is confusion, 2 is class position. So like the 3rd is indifference. So you're not taught to care too much about any one thing because now you're moving on to the next thing. Emotional dependency, where you get a gold star, or if you did a good job, you're a good little boy, you get a gold star, and the other guys get the red tag or whatever if they're being naughty. Intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and the lack of privacy. So you can't have like any kind of time to yourself to think about certain things in the public school system. You're always monitored by a teacher, by everywhere you're going, the other assistant principals or vice principals walking around checking on you. Did you have your hall pass, son?
Well, it's all about compliance. You have to comply with what is going on in that school.
And that kind of, you see it in our society now, with
it's like
obedience to the experts, or appeal to the authorities, and the experts are going to figure this out for you. Just listen to the experts. They've spent the time looking into that. You don't even think about it, dude, because the experts have been thinking about that.
You're sent to school, and you have to sit in the very same seat every day. You have to raise your hand to talk. There's a bell.
Or to go to the bathroom.
There's a bell that tells you to go from one class to another. Your whole life is programmed. There is no room for free thinking. There is no room for problem solving, because they don't want you to. They don't want you to be smart. They don't want you to solve things. That's for the elites, as you were saying. That's for the elites and the managers to tell you what to think and to what you do. But you're just a worker, and that's all we want out of this education system is workers who comply with whatever we tell them to do.
Yep.
I always used to be, I still am. I'm very careful about criticizing public education, because I found that most people that are for it are extremely sensitive to, and it gets people riled up pretty quick. But I know I was homeschooled back when it was extremely unpopular, and we received tons of criticism, tons of persecution because it was just so out of the norm, you know. And there's a lots of worries, and I don't know if it's because I've never set foot in a public school. I don't know if it's actually drilled into people just this kind of mindset. But the thing was you know, the people were worried about our well-being, you know, being able to communicate with others, to socialize, as far as you know, education side too. On that, it's like, well, you know, they're not being taught by professionals. So, you know, how do you expect them to learn anything? And so from all of that, I'm not apologetic about being critical of, you know, public education, but at the same time, I do try to handle people with kids gloves a little bit, because the fact of it is, though, is, I mean, it's an indoctrination system that just, you know, kills creativity. I was just talking with a buddy of mine, and he's recently become kind of, I guess, red pill or woke or whatever you want to call it. And he has been looking into a lot of that stuff. And he said I can't remember where he said the study was, but he was watching this thing about how they watched children's IQ just drop as they went through school, because the creativity and the problem solving was just beat out of them. And like almost every kid that went in almost tested like genius level. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy. And then, like, as they got, I think it might have been like the CIA or something. Somebody will have to look that up. You know, I don't know how much of it is conspiracy theory or how much of it's actual, you know, has some actual research behind it. But, you know, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because it's about taking away that creativity. Like John said, you got to raise your hand, you got to go with the bell, you got to do all the things. It's a compliance system.
Well, it was our education system as it is kind of derived from the Prussian school of education, because they had these soldiers that were running away in battle, and they needed a better way of like getting everyone to conform and to follow orders. So our modern education system is derived from a system that was meant to get you to obey authority and follow the orders that you've been given. So that's, you know, the Prussian model of education. So this book was written by John Taylor Gatto, who was a school teacher for a long period of time, and you know, also went into the history of where the education system is derived. So this is why, you know, don't believe what we're saying. You know, go check it out for yourself. You know, read this book, go into John Taylor Gatto's, some of his other works, and go look it up for yourself, and, you know, get an education. I mean, I grew up in the public education system, and, you know, am a product of that, you know, so I spent a lot of years in you know, kind of confused on the direction of things, like, you know, maybe wish that, yeah, I'd started off doing some kind of business and just started doing something earlier in my life. I am where I am now, so I'm trying to figure those things out now. But you know, really think that would have had a better, you know, because I was always just, I was kind of, when I read this book, I kind of look at it and see like, okay, I was trying to impress these people that were the authority figures by getting these good grades, and these marks were basically, you know, the A's, the B's, the C's, them kind of ranking me in how obedient I was to like listening to all their dictates on giving me all these assignments and things like that. So really, it was like the A student is like, I'm super obedient, you know. So it's like, so now looking back at it, and
you're perfect breeding stock.
Exactly. I mean, it's like
you are class A, brother.
Well, that, you know,
promote those people, right? Promote the obedience.
You know, that's the whole myth of a college education. That's just the next step in compliance. It's like, well, you have a college education. What does that mean? That means you followed directions
You're
from
really
those
good
class
at following
for 4 years. You paid money for it, and so you're ready to work in a corporate job. That's all it is. That's all it is. I mean, I I know because I've been through that, and I've been through the education system, and I've been through the corporate system, and it's like they just want people who's able to comply with whatever they tell you to do. And from a business standpoint, that's genius. That's what you want. You want people to second guess you every time you make a decision. I understand that. But as an individual, as a person, as a human being,
Yeah.
you lose some dignity there, right? Because you don't get to make up your own mind. You don't get to think about what is better or could be better. You only have to support decisions that are already made for you. And and it took me a long time, practically my whole life, to figure out how insidious that was in the very end. And that's when I kind of ditched the whole corporate thing. It's like, I'm selling my soul. Yeah. You know what? The pay was good, but losing my soul was not worth it.
Yeah,
it was not worth it. And I mean,
golden handcuff scenario.
I could have just continued on and made a whole lot more money, and probably would have retired maybe 5 years ago. But what would I have been? I had to live with myself, and as a human being, as an individual, as a decision maker for myself. And and even then, sometimes you just have to swallow your pride and do what they tell you. But hopefully you can maintain enough individuality in yourself. And if it gets too much, just leave. I mean, if there's anybody out there in a corporate job, just leave. I mean, but believe me, if you're at that point in your thinking of like, why am I doing this, and why am I listening to what people are saying, just leave. You're going to be better off in the end, because you're at a point in your thinking that's going to lead you to a better place anyway, because you've got that awareness in your mind of like, this isn't about me. It isn't about anything other than what they want. And if what they want, you want is the same thing, great. But guess what? That doesn't happen very often, And but yeah, just there's not much I can say about that other than you'll never regret leaving something you hate, and that's usually a corporate job. I've done it 2 or 3 times.
And do it while you're young, because it's like easier to kind of bounce back. Like, if it's not working out for you, like go move on to something else, do something entirely different. I mean, but if you're young, you can take bigger risks, I think. And if you got a family, you got some people to support, you might want to like transition into something while you're kind of ready to depart from that other thing. Have something on the back, something ready on the back burner to kind of make that landing a little bit easier.
I'll have to agree with you, Greg, because I did that when I was 40, and I did again when I was 50, and made some pretty dramatic shifts, and they were not fun transitions at the time, but well worth it in the long run. Well worth it in the long run, because when you can have some of your soul back and some of your sovereignty back as a person, it's really big. You sleep. All I can say is you sleep better at night.
I had to do it myself. Yeah, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I left that kind of government contracting stuff and went off to do something else. Because I felt the same way. I was like, I'm losing my soul doing this, man. Yeah. So, well, heck yeah, guys. That's probably a good place to leave it off for tonight. You guys want to go around and tell people where they can follow you and contact you and other stuff you have going on? Logan, you want to go first?
Hideaway Homestead on YouTube, and you can also email me at hideawayhomestead@gmail.com.
All right, John.
And for me, I'm at Soul Survivor 78 on X. I will say, I'm looking for some content creators to come out to my farm tour on the 17th of May, I believe, the 27th, 17th, 27th. I don't know. It's coming up here pretty soon. I'll let y'all know. these two content creators are going to be there, but I'd like more people to come out and film and see what I have on offer as a farm and the way we do things out here. Anybody in the audience that's in this part of the country that wants to come along certainly can. But it's important to me that it's mainly for my customers who've bought from me in the past to get to see how their cattle is raised. And and just see a working, functioning farm-ish kind of place, kind of permaculture, kind of not, but kind of wow, and kind of it's all good. So y'all come out.
All right, great. Well, we'll spread the word on that. And guys, if you like this channel, we do this every Sunday night. Come hang out with us. Contribute to the conversation. If you got questions, if you are hanging out and something strikes you, to let us know in the comments and hang out in the live stream with us. So the Tinker Tribe here on YouTube, and then I also have a channel, Take the Ride 23. If you want to follow along, I've been doing daily workouts for quite a while, and if you want some inspiration on getting healthier. So, all right, with that, guys, we'll end it for tonight, and we'll catch you guys next week. And John and Logan, always a pleasure. And we'll see you guys next time.